Good afternoon. Today I have an interesting revolver. What makes it interesting is it is a tribute to an army that no longer exists and is part of the U.S.'s history. That army would be the Confederate Army. So, Confederate revolver, the Griswold revolver, was modeled after the Colt revolver. This is a 44 black powder. So first rule of gun safety, treat it as if it's loaded. Second rule, check and confirm. There's a little nut here. You're going to get a brass hammer or a rubber mallet. This is actually to another revolver I have, so I'm just going to tap this out. Remove the pin. Remove the barrel. Remove the cylinder. Cylinder is empty. So we're going to put this back on. Put the barrel back on. Put the pin back in. What? Really? What's wrong? You don't know, do you? Tap it back in. All right. So, right here we have engraved on the cylinder the Confederate flag, better known as the Rebel flag. On the other side here, we have engraved on part of the barrel, CSA, which Confederate State Army. Underneath it, we have for the Confederacy and Dixie American Civil War, April 1861 to April 1865. And then on the spine, it reads Confederate State Army Tribute. So, well, this was used by the South, the Confederacy. This revolver here was used by the North, or the Union. This is a Army Remington, also 44 black powder. The engravings I did on my own, however. This is the California State Poppy. Underneath the cylinder reads 9/9/1850, which is the date, month, and year California became the 31st state. Put this in half cock. You can see I engraved the California state on the cylinder, along with the number 31, because it was the 31st state. On the spine, it reads the California Republic. On the right behind the hammer is the California flag. And then if you follow the barrel, right behind the front sight, it says Eureka, which is the California state motto. If it wasn't clear, I live in California. So the Civil War, or at least the Confederacy anyway, has become a very hot topic for a lot of states, especially the southern states, as a kind of a dark spot in our history, which that is true. Slavery is bad. But depending on what side you fought on, you looked at it through a different lens. For example, in Northern California here, we see slavery as evil and should be done away with, which it was, but there were a lot of, back in the day, Southern Californians who sympathized with the South and felt that the North was being aggressive towards, the South. There were also the belief that it was a violation of their Fifth Amendment right, which reads, no person shall be held to answer for a capital or otherwise infamous crime unless on a presentment or indictment of a grand jury, except in cases arising in the land or naval force or in the militia, when in actual service in time of war or public danger, nor shall any person be subject for the same offense to be twice put in jeopardy, double jeopardy, of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, You cannot self-incriminate. Nor be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law. Things cannot be taken away from you until the court proceedings have ended, i.e., being in jail. Nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. The government can't just take your house without giving you something for it. So, what does it have to do? The Fifth Amendment says I cannot self-incriminate and the government can't take away my property. That's kind of where we're going with this. I mean, it's easy now to go, oh, slavery is bad in the U.S. and other countries, but in some countries, slavery is still a thing, and this person is still viewed as property. Meaning, during the Civil War, slaves were a commodity that you can purchase, and therefore they were your property, and they felt by abolishing slavery without just compensation is to violate the South's right to own slaves. That's what makes it a hot topic. Because in the Union, though a lot of Union people were anti-slavery, abolitionist? Yes, they were abolitionist. There were, I believe, 4 or 7 states, I know Delaware was one of them, that still owned slaves. Yes, there were states in the Union that owned slaves. And then the 54th Massachusetts, which was an all African-American brigade, were part of the Union, but they were treated about the same by the people they were fighting alongside as the people they were fighting against. In fact, they made a movie about it called Glory, which is about the 54th Massachusetts. It has Matthew Broderick, Denzel Washington, Stay Off the Table, and Morgan Freeman in it. It's a good movie. I suggest you watch it. So, what was the Civil War about? Was it about slavery? Was it about violation of state rights? Or was it, as Abraham Lincoln put it, it was about the preservation of the Union of the United States? All depends on what kind of lens you want to look through. Because there were Union states that owned slaves, and in the South, only 30% of all the South owned slaves. And in the North, it was about abolishing slavery. So, enough of my talking. Let's see how these pistols perform. Alright, so here I'm on the hill. Safety glasses. Earplugs.
Yeah, get plugged in. Alright, where's my phone? Okay, good enough.
Alright, so this is a black powder 44, 30 grains, 3F powder, and we're going to take a couple shots with it. No.
What the hell?
Okay, so what we think it is was bad caps.
cartridge. Oh.
Then my Remington 44, 30 grains.
Come shoot it a couple times, baby. Come on. Well, you got it. Where in the fuck is it going?
I don't know.
Auto shot.
Okay, so let's talk Civil War. Do you feel it's important to teach young Americans?
Yes.
What about do you think is important?
All of it. There's no aspect should be left out. From slavery to economics to the war itself.
All right, Mom, as a Native American, do you feel like the Natives aren't getting enough attention about the Civil War, that it's just been African slaves?
Yes.
Native Americans also owned African slaves.
Native Americans also fought for both sides and were owned as slaves.
They also had all their lands taken away from them. Were herded onto reservations.
The black slave owners had their lands taken from them to move in white colonists who were wealthy. There were many colors. Small dirt farmers that were white lost their property.
All right. What do you think was the actual cause of the Civil War, if not slavery?
Economics. And the South wanting to break away from the North. The Southern states wanted sovereignty so that they could run their states the way that they seen fit without the interference of the North.
Mother, do you agree with that, or do you think there was another reason to the Civil War?
That's a lot of it right there. Because they didn't bring slavery into the war until a year after the war had started.
And the North had won a campaign. Lincoln did not want to bring slavery into it, or even the blacks, until he felt that the Union could win.
It had nothing to do with the Union winning. The issue was they're trying to break away because of the blacks. That's why the blacks were involved into the war.
Well, would you say that even though 4 Union states owned slaves, that the North was completely against slavery, or just against certain aspects of slavery?
They were against it spreading beyond those states.
Right. They didn't want it spread into any other state. They were allowed to keep what slaves they had, and the states that had them were allowed to keep it. He didn't want any new slave states created. Period.
So do you feel if the South just kept the slaves they had, that the Union would have left them alone?
No, I do not. Again, it was an economic war.
I think they would have left them alone.
No. No.
Yes.
The North had all the mills, the South had all the raw product. And they were angry because of the prices that they were paying for those commodities, because as far as they were concerned, the South was profiting off of free labor.
Okay, but the main thing was the South wanting to break away. That's what started the war. It had very little to do with the buying and selling. That was just another reason.
What started the war was the fact that the North was trying to impose their beliefs on these southern states.
So you believe it was a violation of their Fifth Amendment right, the right to own property?
Yeah,
People are not property.
they were then. They were seen as property. I mean, today, no, they are not. But then they were property. They were bought and sold as property.
Well, then let's talk about indentured servants. You know, the Irish, how everyone says the Irish weren't slaves because they had a contract they could have fulfilled.
The Irish were slaves. Most of them died before the contracts were ever completed.
But they had the option to sign the contract, whereas the black people didn't, nor did any of the Native Americans.
They were slaves.
They weren't given a choice. The Irish were given the choice.
The Dutch were slaves, and they weren't indigenous. They
Nobody was indigenous to this country
indentured.
except for
yeah,
the
they there were no contracts. They were slaves. You see them whining and crying about all the bullshit? No. Or can I say that?
You can say that, but do you feel that the Black Lives Matter is making the whole 200 years of slave thing just background noise, more or less? It's just something that they fall back on because there's nothing else they can bring to validate their views.
I believe that it is creating more of an issue than resolving one.
In my opinion, it's creating a lot more black hate than resolving it, because they're constantly going at people with this rhetoric to the point where they get aggravated and then they want to hate them.
And then tearing down all the monuments in the South and destroying all those things that would have been a federal offense 3 years ago. Yeah, all of a sudden became okay? No. A lot of those
whether
people,
they like it or not, those monuments are a part of American history.
and so is slavery.
So you're saying we shouldn't be able to pick and choose what is valid to history? It should all be learned because
It
there
should
is
all be taught.
Yes, every last bit of it, because there is good and bad in every situation. Okay, the black people don't like the monuments because they imposed slavery. Well, that was their job. At that point in time, that was their job. And that is a point of American history. That is a learning point. They did it because it was their job.
And if they really want to preach about something and tear monuments down, maybe they ought to go after the black slave owners. Because throughout history, there were many. Many.
Do you feel that after the Black Lives Matter in the wake of cancel culture, that is violating our First Amendment, the freedom of speech, no matter what media it takes, even if that speech is, say, a history film?
Yeah. It definitely does.
Like
you cannot censor one party and allow another to go out and do whatever they want to when if they feel it's okay. Why censor one and let the other one carry on?
Well, because in today's new idea that because one is offensive is why it needs to be censored.
They're offensive.
Everything is offensive to somebody. I mean, there's nothing in this entire world that anybody can say or do that is not offensive to at least one other person.
Right, well, shortly after the Civil War, the 13th Amendment was established, was defined what is an American, which is anyone who's born in America. 1 second. So, one last question. Do you think if the Civil War never happened, there would be a need for the 13th Amendment, which defines what a U.S. citizen is, being anyone born in the U.S.? Do you feel without the Civil War, that would have never been added?
It would have never been an issue.
There's not a whole lot of people who are actually, or even every descendant in this country is not from this country, with the exception of the Native Americans.
I'm from this country.
Your descendants come from Ireland.
Okay, my descendants might not have been, but I am an American.
Your ancestor.
I was born in this country.
So you feel the Civil War...
You're still just a descendant of an immigrant.
Tell me what you want.
So you feel the Civil War is important, but do you feel bringing up what our ancestors did to another people's ancestors, do you feel that has any relevancy with today? No? Dad?
Yeah.
No. So just because your ancestor was a slave 200 years ago doesn't mean you now are a slave?
No. Hell no.
So you think it's just a giant victim mentality?
Yes,
Yeah.
Because otherwise, I would still be on a reservation eating bad beef and flour. You know, Native Americans didn't have flour. We didn't grow wheat. That's why most of us are allergic to milk and milk products, because we didn't have cattle.
And milk and buffalo was out of the question.
Sure thing. Them female buffaloes are Maine.
All right, so last question. This is more opinion based, doesn't have any real bearing. Do you think the right side won?
No. I do not.
Do you believe a man should own another man?
I do not. No man should own another.
And then the government
But
has...
no government has the right to enforce its will upon any other state that chooses to succeed.
Would you say that's why the
And our government does that.
Would you say that's why our colonial ancestors rebelled against the British, because they were trying
That's exactly right. Taxation without representation. They were fed up with all
Okay,
the taxes.
and you're completely contradicting the white man.
No,
No man has the right to impose themselves on another.
no state, no nation, no nothing has the right.
Your
to
nation
impose.
came in and took over the Native American.
We saved you.
Didn't save us. Fucked us up. Made us greedy.
All right, so this section I might have to cut out of the video. All right, well, thank you for your time, and hopefully this will teach the internet of young people a different perspective on things. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please click the like button. If you have any suggestions or criticisms, leave a comment. And if you want to stay tuned for my next project, don't forget to click that subscribe icon and ring that bell. So, until our next project, have a beautiful day.